天晚上特别特别高兴的是，因为其实大家不知道有没有意识，在我们这几年的工作过程当中，其实我们还是蛮多的接触到了一些家庭需要一些 hand-holding，一些特殊的帮助的一些特殊的孩子，这些孩子们极其的优秀，实际上特别的聪明，学习成绩上面很多是极其的 high level，GPA 很好，但是因为毕竟这些好的学校，他在招一个未来的 future 的 leader。future 的能够引领社会、改变社会的一些人，那么我们的孩子们可以当然从不同的角色来 make a contribution to the society，也是这些孩子们能够从不同地方来改变社会、引领人类的这个进步哈。所以不代表这个孩子们需要all 全面，但是呢，我们依然要培养他们如何把自己的 idea 要 share 给他人，毕竟还是要 impact， 对吧？这个 impact 最重要。所以今天晚上 Marcus 老师的话题呢是着重在，如果孩子诊断出来他们在某一个领域特别特别的聪明，但是他们可能在其他方面会有一些障碍，社交障碍啊，学习障碍啊。那么这些孩子们在申请大学的时候，他们该如何择校，如何准备申请？同时，在这个申请过程当中，我们这个 ADHD 的这样的一个特殊的需求的利弊和需不需要去 release 这样的 information 给 future 的这个学校。同时 ADHD 的学生他们可利用的资源有哪些，然后有哪些工具包，今天晚上 Marcus 老师也会跟我们分享。那么家长们，我们作为第一线的跟孩子天天接触的这些 mentor 哈，我们这个家长也是 mentor 对吗？那这些 mentor， 那您从情感上面和时间管理上面，因为在这些方面有些我们接触到孩子会有一些障碍，会有一些 delay， 会有一些比较需要一些特殊的支持。那么今天晚上，在这个2个小时过程当中，我们希望 Marcus 老师能给大家带来一些 intake， 能够大家 take away， 来帮助很好的在这个升学的过程当中，在这一部分上给予孩子一定强有力的支持。Okay, so now I am going to start. I made a quickly introduction for you, Marcus, and then obviously you can make more introduction. And Marcus 老师，我要强调一下，不仅仅在 ADHD 方面有很多的经验，但他自己本身是哥大毕业的一个很有经验的导师，所以他在其他的升学的一些学生当中也非常非常有经验啊。他这个当然就是占的比例，可能 ADHD 的孩子可能10%，但是他其他的就是学习上面没有障碍的学生们 ，Marcus 老师也是非常非常有经验的啊。然后我们今天晚上就听他来分享。那么 Let me right now use warmest welcome representing our family and also parents to welcome Marcus. Now the floor is yours. Thank you very much for tonight's information sharing.
Thank you, Sophia. I'm going to share my slideshow here. Yes, I'm Marcus. Good morning to those of you in Asia. And wait, sorry, that's the wrong thing. 1 second. There we go. Okay. Good morning to those of you in Asia and good evening here in the United States. And, okay, my technology is usually better than this. Here we go.
That's
slideshow.
Okay.
All right. Better yet. All right, here we go. So I'm Marcus. I've been working in independent college admissions for about 18 years or so at this point. So this is my almost 2 decades as we enter application season. In that time, I've also worked as an educational consultant for a number of companies and families. And part of my kind of practice has focused a lot on students with other learning needs. So ADHD is the one we're going to talk about tonight, but I've also worked with students with dyslexia, dysgraphia, processing issues, all kinds of special needs. So that's what we're going to focus on tonight. A little bit of our agenda. I'm going to just start with kind of walking everyone through what ADHD is and especially how to plan for it for high school success before we turn to the actual college admissions process. And I have some time at the end for a question and answer. So if anything's missing here, just hold your questions till the end and we'll stick around. So for ADHD, it's a attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's a neurodevelopmental disorder characterized by inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. Essentially what it does for students who have it is it makes it hard for them to focus. It's become a much more common diagnosis in the last decade and a half, in part because teachers are looking for it, in part because doctors are looking for it, And in part just because I think our society has gotten a lot more, a lot faster paced and a lot, I don't know, harder for all of us to maybe stay on focus. We walk around with phones in our pockets that just take our attention at all times. And then imagine the impulse control of a child with all that technology and flashing lights and screens and so forth. It makes it a lot more difficult for them to focus. What it does for a student perspective is it makes it difficult for them to organize things, to manage time effectively, and other executive functioning issues. And it can also kind of be paired with other learning disabilities or emotional needs. So it's very common, for example, for a student to have both ADHD and an executive processing issue, or ADHD and dyslexia, or often ADHD will trigger anxiety and depression and other things like that. Because, I mean, basically it makes it so it's a lot harder for a student to do the sort of tasks that have been asked of him or her. Currently, though, I mean, it's not anything to be ashamed of. It's very common. About 11% of American youth have it, or are diagnosed with it. And that number typically grows each year, again, for all the reasons I've mentioned. With ADHD, we can kind of talk about special needs that a student might have. So the first thing to note, because a student has ADHD, it doesn't separate them in any way in terms of ability or progress or process, but it does require some interventions. So on a more extreme level, and there are various ranges of ADHD, so you can have a mild case or a more serious case. On a more serious case, you may require a 504 plan or an IEP, which is an individualized education plan. They call this thing different names in different states and different countries. But typically what it means is that there's an intervention at the school level that may come with extra time on tests, specialized tutoring, note-taking assistance. Sometimes the accommodations for a test might include moving a student to an individual room so they take a test after school in a private situation. Sometimes there's accommodations that you can get for auditory things, so you can have like an earbud in your ear, or to kind of block extra noises and distractions. For those kind of school-based interventions, you will typically need a diagnosis from a psychiatrist or an educational therapist, which will usually come after a variety of tests are given. Regardless of how serious it is, it's always important to get a student a support system at school and at home. So even if you don't have the IEP or the 504, I always suggest reaching out to the guidance counselor at school, maybe the homeroom teacher, anybody at school who can help, just so everybody at the school is aware of a student's ADHD, even if they technically haven't qualified for that extra planning. At home, we also have special needs that we want, but again, I'll kind of talk through the different spectrums of this. And at home, you want to have a support system that understands this, which is all, what we're all trying to do here tonight, I think. So for that kind of severity thing, as I mentioned, the students who have the IEPs or the 504s, typically we'll have combined presentation. This is a more extreme version. It means that there's inattention issues, so that focus issue I mentioned before, alongside some impulsivity, meaning they can't control their own actions or thoughts, or hyperactivity. We think sometimes of those kids who are like bouncing off the wall at the grocery store. Sometimes that's just a normal kid. Sometimes that's a kid with ADHD. And that hyperactivity tends to dissipate as students get older and more mature, again, unless you have ADHD. There's also a predominantly inattentive presentation, which doesn't have both of these things. It really just means a student loses focus and just kind of tunes things out. And then you can also, of course, have just the impulse and hyperactivity presentation, which means you can focus, you can do a lot of things at a high level. You just sort of make bad decisions, let's say. In terms of those challenges faced by ADHD students, regardless of that kind of level of severity, although again, with higher severity would mean each of these things gets more challenging. But as I mentioned, students will have trouble with organization and time management. And if they have that impulse control thing, it's tempting for a student to, want to play video games for 4 hours instead of doing their math homework, that kind of thing. Those are all the kind of things that we know we've already talked about. The other things that you want to be aware of, just having ADHD and having your brain function in a different way tends to cause higher levels of stress and anxiety in the student. There's something about just the process of being different that makes a student feel different and uncomfortable, which can kind of snowball with the stress and anxiety, especially as schoolwork gets more challenging. if you already have trouble with time management, and then all of a sudden you have 7 projects due the same week, that snowballs as well, which causes more anxiety as you can't manage your time when you had a simple task. Now you have 7 of them, and it just sort of feeds into itself. This can also then lead to social challenges. Students who can't focus have trouble focusing on their friends. And then the thing that I think most of us are concerned about from a college point of view, we tend to see academic underachievement, even from very, very smart students. So one of the things to kind of look out for, and one of the things that we need to be aware of as educators and parents and support systems, is we want to remember that a student who has ADHD, it has to work harder for everything, but their level of potential is still the same as any other students. They just have to work past some things. The other thing that happens, though, we get those learning disabilities that get paired alongside of it, and they can be harder to detect. So I've had a lot of students over the years who have an ADHD diagnosis when they're 10, 11. By the time I'm working with them in high school, I've noticed that they have dysgraphia or dyslexia, and it's just never been diagnosed because parents and teachers just assume it's the ADHD that's preventing them from doing their math work or reading properly. And what happens, especially for gifted students who also have ADHD or other things, is they tend to make up compensation strategies. So a student will figure out a way around their dyslexia or their dysgraphia to kind of mask it. But again, at some point that catches up because the workload gets harder. So we want to be aware again that you need to be patient with these students, but also still not let them use the ADHD as an excuse to not reaching their full potential. In terms of high school success then, so building on this, I've already stressed the thing at the bottom of the slide here, the most important one, which is patience. But one of the things that's most important and most beneficial for helping a student with ADHD is making them develop a routine. So we can cut down on a lot of the impulse control by just having a student do the same thing every day. So every day they get up at 7:30, every day they brush their teeth, every day they eat this for breakfast, every day they catch the bus at this time. And you kind of prevent that ability for them to make that wrong decision because everything's rote, everything's the routine and normal for that. And same with the after school schedule, as much as possible, try to get them home at the same time and engaged in an activity. In terms of school things, so it's important to use those school resources. So as I mentioned, try to get the 504, try to get the IEP, or at least talk to the school about tutoring services and counseling help and accommodations. That requires communication between all parties. So teacher has to talk to the student, who has to talk to the parent, who has to talk back to the teacher. So we all kind of are in that same wavelength of this. It's also important from our point of view at IvyCompass that you talk to any other counselor or mentor or academic assistant that we know, whether it be a tutor, whether it be a research professor, anyone involved in this, so we all kind of know what the situation is. Especially with ADHD students, for me as a person who's done this, worked with them for a long time, the most frustrating thing for me often is the canceling of lessons and sessions at the last second. And I always have to remind myself, oh yeah, this is the way that the student is kind of programmed. But it's easier to cut back on that if the parent is communicating with me and the teacher and everybody else. The other thing that I like to stress, so students do get better with their ADHD as they get older, not always, but some of the time. And the times that have noticed that students really do get better is when they find a passion or an interest somewhere in the school day or outside of the school day, because it's just easier to focus on things that you like. So a student may hate physics or chemistry and have their ADHD sort of syndromes triggered a little bit more. And then they come home and they really like theater. And they can somehow focus entirely on their play practice or their musical rehearsal. Or I've had students before find a love of working in a lab and a research laboratory, which seems like a bad situation or a bad place for a student with ADHD because they have to focus on very small things. But if the student is super passionate about bio or physics or whatever the subject is, they'll show up for that every day and love it. So the main thing that we would try to do is really try to get that student to kind of find their best self, which again involves finding something that they really care about and are passionate about, while also, as it says there in all caps, stressing patience. In terms of, I've mentioned this a few times, in terms of actual accommodations that someone like me cannot provide, but that a school can. So this is the IEP and the 504. Again, it's the thing that you need the extra testing for. I've mentioned these already, test time, extensions, etc. One of the things I want to stress for this is that if you can get the IEP or the 504, this is the way that you get accommodations for things like the SAT and ACT, which is very helpful for a student then when they do have to take those tests. AP exams, SAT, ACT, most state-based exams. So like New York has the Regents exams, California has Cal Standards. Any of those exams like that, if the student has qualified for that extra time or accommodation at school through the IEP or 504, they will almost always get the accommodation on the test, which is very helpful since those tests are part of the college planning process. Again, the three-step process of this: first, identify that there is a need for this. Schools don't just give this for students who don't need it, obviously. Check with your child's school to see what paperwork they're going to need. Usually, like I said, not always, but usually that will require an evaluation from an outside professional who will then submit a report, like a psych profile of the student and their needs to the high school, and then the high school can decide which accommodations the student gets. The ACT and SAT, SAT is run by College Board, as is the AP, but both the ACT and SAT will typically take whatever the school tells them they get and give the student the same accommodation. Historically, for what it's worth, the ACT is a little bit pickier on this and is more often than the SAT to deny a student's extra timing accommodations. But again, each situation is unique. In terms of what you as a parent can provide, so I've mentioned a lot of these. It's kind of repetitive, I know. The biggest one that I focus on here is time management. So helping a student establish a routine and providing kind of reinforcement for that routine is super key. And again, it sort of prevents those situations where a student can let the ADHD control them. On top of that, though, emotional support. I mean, I think we all know that as parents and support systems, you want to be patient with the student. You want to understand where they are and encourage them. It's easy, as I said, with a student who can't focus, it's easy to lose patience, especially a high school teacher who has 40 students to deal with, or 30 in an hour, whatever. It's very easy to lose patience with a kid or snap at them. At home, we just can't do that. You have to remember that with a student with an extra accommodation, ADHD, dyslexia, any of the ones we're mentioning, the student has to work harder. So we also need to accept that the student will have to work harder for some things to accomplish other things. Especially, I've seen this a lot with parents. The older brother will have ADHD, the younger brother won't. And it's easy for a parent to kind of compare and say, oh, why can't you be more like your brother? And that's just really the worst thing you can say to a student who's really, really trying through their ADHD. In terms of success for college, so this is where I want to turn our attention now. So the first things first, most colleges, and I'm saying most, but what I really mean is I've never seen a school that does not have this. But I want to couch it that there might single-handedly be a school someplace that doesn't have this. But every college I've ever spoken to, or every college I've ever sent a student to, has a disability service. And so for a student, what they need to do is do some research on how to contact that disability service at the school, typically before the time that they actually matriculate as a student. So after you've gotten accepted into the college, after you've accepted the offer, that summer before freshman year is when you reach out to make sure you can get your accommodations. But especially for a college student, that really means self-advocacy. A student's 18 by that point, parents can still help, but colleges are used to dealing with the student directly. And then as long as that student has built on some good strategies in high school, time management strategies, planners, et cetera, they just bring those with them to college and kind of build in the same routine. Obviously, the schedule, they're in charge of the schedule, so it's a little bit harder for them to reinforce themselves, but that's why they would want to be able to use planners, digital tools. There's a lot of devices you can put on your phone, for example, to make you focus. So it'll block your phone for an hour and a half, or you can block the internet for an hour and a half while you read, those kind of things. But the other thing is, it is college. So we want students to have fun. We want students to meet friends. We want students to engage with the world. So it's important for a student to set time to find, academic success, of course, but also a nice social life, join some student clubs, a fraternity, a club, an a cappella group, whatever, and also take time for themselves. So especially another trick that I've found, especially for male students, if you can get them on an exercise regimen in their senior year or junior year of high school, the ADHD kind of cures itself a bit because a lot of that hyper activity that we see has an outlet. So I've had a lot of students over the years who get really into weightlifting or really into swimming or really into distance running. And those are all skills you can bring with you to college that can help you cope with, ADHD. In terms of selecting colleges, so this can be, this is always a harder process because selecting colleges is itself a difficult process. But a student and a family need to sit down and consider a lot of different things here. By the time the student's applying to college and, in the fall of their senior year, they should know themselves pretty well. They'll know what triggers them for ADHD. They'll know what they can focus on, what they can't focus on. So it's important for the student to figure out for him or herself, what kind of school do they want? And I will say this is different for every student. This isn't a generality for ADHD students. I've had some students over the years of ADHD, and the idea of going to a small school in the middle of nowhere stresses them out, and so it makes them think they're not going to focus at all. So they want to go to, a very large school like Michigan or UCLA or something. And then I've had other students with ADHD who say the opposite, that if they're at UCLA or Michigan or Cal or Stanford or whatever the giant school is, they're overwhelmed and they're afraid that they're going to kind of spiral out of control with their ADHD because there's too many distractions. So that's a conversation to have. As I mentioned, I've never seen a school that does not have a support service. But depending on the degree of ADHD, we may look ahead at what kinds of support services are specifically offered. And also, and this is key, what paperwork we need to provide in order for that student to get those support services. So those educational therapist tests that I mentioned before, they have a shelf life. And depending on the state and what test it is, it may be 5 years, it may be 10 years, it may be 2 years. So often you need to do another evaluation for a student to get accommodations. At college, you need to do another evaluation right before. So we want to double check that ahead of time to make sure that the student can get the support they need. And then the other thing, just campus culture. So it kind of ties into what I said about the school size, but is it a campus that is one in which the students are more independent or less independent? There are some colleges where, especially a larger state school, you show up for orientation, they give you the materials, and then you're sort of on your own, and unless you seek out that help, right? Unless you go and get the support service, unless you go and talk to the RA or the advisor. And then there are other colleges, especially the smaller liberal arts ones, where they'll often send emails to parents when the student doesn't show up for a class. And it's that kind of level of handholding, which again, some students want and need, some students don't. But on top of that, the other things that you want to consider is all the other stuff that we consider when we talk about college. What's the academic profile? Do they have a major for the student? Is it close to home or far from home? How much does it cost? Is it kind of a good vibe for the student? Do they have the resources that they want beyond ADHD needs, but like a big gym or a football team or any of those things? So again, I want to stress here, as we're talking about ADHD students, I don't mean to separate them like they don't do the same things that every other student does. We still need to figure out all of those other college components. So that being said, I want to talk about some schools that have very specific, like highly focused ADHD programs. And then I want to talk through some schools that I just know from my experience of students who have gotten into these schools and had success with it. I'll stress this, all of the accommodations that we're mentioning for any school that's in the United States, it's mandated under these two laws. So the Americans with Disabilities Act or Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. And this basically means that if you are a university or a college that gets any funding from the state or federal government, you have to comply with these acts. So it's the same thing that says, you have to have a wheelchair ramp or those kinds of things. Also requires you to have offices that help students with diverse learning needs. Again, there are, I'm sure, some examples. I have never seen a school that does not have these. So that I just want to put the caveat there. So some of the some of the accommodations that schools will provide from 504 and IEP and Americans with Disability Acts. It's the same things that we kind of talked about in high school. So extended time on tests is a common thing, which will allow for, it might be time and a half, it might be twice as much time. It might also be a test that you take at home. Second thing that we've seen, reduced distraction testing environments. In that high school I mentioned, it's common for a student to go into a separate room and take the test by themselves. At college, often this will be a test that you just take online with a camera monitoring you. Or it may be that you do it in the TA's office after class the next day. For more extreme ADHD students, some colleges will provide a note-taking service, which usually is a digital assistant at this point, kind of works like AI. It'll just jot down the professor's notes. Or some schools will allow you to take a program in on your computer that will do that for you and just take notes on it so you can kind of organize it that way. Recorded lectures, some schools will allow students to record lectures and review material at their own pace. That one, most professors, you have to ask ahead of time because they sort of have their own situation where they have copyrighted material and stuff. But technically, that's supposed to be allowed for a student who needs it. And then there's priority registration. So some schools will provide students with ADHD and other needs early access to classes because there may be classes that do have these accommodations that fill up quickly. So example, like the recorded lectures, some professors may not allow it. So the registrar will help the student get into the class for the professor who does allow recorded lectures. And then assignment extensions. So students may be offered to finish the class over winter break or things like that. I will stress with all of these, no professor is going to give you any of these after the fact. You know, there's not a college professor in America that's going to say on the day that the assignment's due, oh, I didn't know you had ADHD, so you can have it 2 weeks from now. It's all things you have to ask for ahead of time. So it goes back to that self-advocacy thing. A student needs to, at the beginning of the year and beginning of their college career, make sure that they have it in their profile and in their account, basically, that they get these accommodations. Other types of accommodations we'll see. So there's tech accommodations. Laptop use, that's pretty much ubiquitous at colleges these days. But again, professors and TAs and other lecturers don't always allow the use of a laptop for certain things. So you can usually type up your own notes, but they often will ask for a blocker software on other tabs that might be open. A student who has accommodations may have access around that if they need the laptop for something. And then, as I mentioned before, there's like speech to text programs that are kind of AI driven at this point, or organizational apps that you can use, electronic planners. You could sort of set things up on like Google Sheets and make a series of planners for yourself. There's all kinds of time management tools. There's things that you can add to your email that will sort the emails for you in terms of priority. There's all kinds of new technology that we can use on this. And then there's also support services at school. So again, just like we see in high school, there's academic coaching. That's a harder one to get usually because it's a one-on-one. Typically, instead of academic coaching, you'll be just encouraged to go and talk to your professor during their office hours. But in extreme situations, the student can get a one-on-one coach, which should be somebody who helps them do everything. It's the same kind of thing that recruited athletes are given often. So there will be something like an academic coach for the team, the basketball team or the football team or something, who offers this. And then they'll also offer the use of a person like that for students with a disability. Counseling services. So again, every college has good counseling services, some better than others. But the counseling services can provide mental health therapy for students who have stress, anxiety, depression, stemming from ADHD. And they can usually also offer strategies for managing symptoms. Peer tutoring is available to pretty much everybody at college. But again, you can ask for special types of peer tutors at a university if you have ADHD. And then there's also, and this is common again at most universities, workshops on study skills or time management or how to stay organized. There are a couple other accommodations. So these are less common, I would say. Um, I wouldn't just say like absolutely these are less common. Flexible attendance. So if some students with an ADHD diagnosis or an IEP can essentially get a sitting a get out of class free card, so they don't have to show up for certain times. Again, that's rare, I think, for obvious reasons. And then alternative assignments. This I've seen a lot actually, because especially when you get later on in the college career, so like in the junior and senior year, often professors will be pretty lenient on what they want you to do to assess you. So instead of an exam, if you have a test anxiety thing or an accommodation for ADHD, they'll sometimes ask you to come up with a different assignment. You might write a long essay, you might do a project or a presentation of some kind. And again, that's one of those things, as long as the student negotiates it at the beginning of the semester or quarter, usually can work out for them at the professor's discretion. So as I mentioned earlier, every school pretty much that I know of offers some kind of support service. I do want to just highlight 5 schools that are really known for this. And these are not admittedly the most selective schools. I'll go to the selective ones in a second. These are just schools that I've recommended to students in the past who have really extreme ADHD cases. So students who the medication does not work, the accommodations we talk about in school don't work, and they really, really struggle. So there's Landmark College, which is a small college in Vermont that has essentially a bachelor's program and associate program that's just designed for students with who need extensive support. So extremely dyslexic students, that kind of thing. American University in Washington, D.C. Has a special program, which is the LSP, which is, again, a support system just for ADHD. The University of Arizona has the SALT Center, which is a thing they put a lot of money into, actually, and it's sort of a state-of-the-art facility and state-of-the-art program that is designed to figure out, they both research and then also teach students alternative forms of education. So instead of just focusing on ADHD and the accommodations we talk about, they come up with a completely new paths for a student to learn and get a college degree. Adelphi in Long Island has something like that as well. And then Beacon College in Florida has, again, it's the entire college is set up for students who have other learning needs. But again, these are something all colleges pretty much have. So I want to just go through a few systems, a few schools that have ADHD support that some of my students over the years have reported as being really positive. This is not an extensive list. This is just, again, students that I've had. So Cal Berkeley and UCLA have very similar systems. And I just want to highlight this. If you have a student with a more severe case of ADHD, but not so severe that we need to go to the SALT program at University of Arizona or someplace like that, state schools are always a good offer because state schools get funding from the federal government and state governments. So they are even more required to provide support and accommodations for students. And there's some great state schools. So I have the top 3 that I've listed here: UCLA, Cal Berkeley, Michigan. I've had students have great success in these schools. I could have added it to UVA in Virginia. I've had students have success there as well. And then again, pretty much every state school that I can think of has some kind of program like this. So most of these have a special office for students, and then they can get the support that they need. Cornell, this one, I've had a couple of students over the years who have been very, very, very good students, but who have had a lot of specialized learning needs. So a student get into the ILR program up there, which is the International or Labor Relations. It's a school of, industrial labor relations. It's a kind of like a business school, but a business school that's sort of fused with politics. And I had a student who had such a severe case of ADHD and anxiety that he was literally pulled out of school for like I think a full semester, half a semester, back during COVID lockdowns. And so it was kind of a struggle to get him into schools, and he ended up in Cornell with that. They were super supportive of everything. He got his boarding school that he went to write a bunch of things basically explaining what the situation was and the needs that he had, and he's doing well up there. And another student at Cornell get into Dyson, which is the actual business school. His case was less severe, but he had extra time on his SAT and ACT tests and his APs. And last I heard, he's doing well. And then Hopkins in Baltimore, same thing. I've had students get into the some of the science programs there who have, again, ADHD. And then a few other ones. I just want to highlight these specific programs. So again, all of these offer this. So I've got Princeton, UNC, and Penn. The two I really wanted to highlight here, Penn and Georgetown. So Penn has a specific learning resource center that offers comprehensive support for all kinds of disabilities. And it's partially tied into all of their colleges, but it works closely with the education school. So they have researchers and things going on and doing that. And then Georgetown, I've had a number of students over the years who especially have loved the workshops that they do. So I had a student who actually led a couple of the workshops in her senior year because she'd done so well with that. But again, I'll highlight this. Every school that I've ever heard of can offers services for this. So turning away from the specific schools, I just want to go through again some of the toolkits and resources, and then talk about some of the things that we would do in a planning stage to sort of work around or work with ADHD for a college application. So the top 6 things I put on the screen here, these are the things that I found work with all of my students. So for a note-taking software, so even in sessions that I'll have with a student with ADHD, I always take notes, but I will always make them take notes as well. Making the student do kind of a multitasking thing helps them focus more. It gives them something to do kind of with their nervous energy. But you can also use note-taking software, so they take notes and then they compare to the transcription. Time management apps are key. That's one of the great things. Our phones, they can send little alarms and things like that for every event. Just making organized calendars is helpful. A lot of my students have had good luck with a family calendar. So you set up a Google Calendar for the entire household that has the students' assignments in it, who has soccer practice when, who has baseball practice, who's driving, whatever today. And you can put the students' assignments in there. So it's a sort of a way for a family to keep tabs on the kid, and also for the student to have ownership of his or her own schedule, but also somebody's checking in on them and supporting it. And then planners, just honestly, a good old-fashioned day calendar is always helpful. In terms of the support networks too, so counseling services is definitely the best one, but I feel like I've talked about that a lot. So I think we get the idea. The other two I'd point out, in local areas, and the schools can usually connect you with this. There's a lot of ADHD support groups, and there'll be ones for teenagers, so specifically ADHD for high school students, which can be helpful for just helping that student navigate stress and, having somebody to talk to. There's also ADHD support groups for parents, which are parents of ADHD students. Again, this doesn't exist everywhere, but places that have it, it's helpful, again, to kind of figure out some different accommodations and different interventions that work for different families. And if you don't have those in your area, there's online forums that are dedicated to this from all kinds of resources. And you can always, obviously be careful with what you read online. We always have to say that, but generally speaking, the online forums are pretty helpful in these. So long and short of it, does an ADHD diagnosis prevent you from getting into your dream school? No, 100% does not. The only question we have to kind of consider with it is, how do we work around it? So this is what I want to just turn for the last few minutes of our presentation, kind of towards the advice part of this and what I would do with a student. So the first things first on this, I cannot stress this enough. Students with ADHD really need to start early. So the goal is honestly a 9th or 10th grader, you want to establish these habits and get them to kind of buy into the end goal here, which is getting them into college. This time of year, families call me all the time. They want help on the application, which is normal. I'm happy to help. But with a student who has not had the interventions, the work of what I can do with that student gets a lot more difficult. Not that, I'm not happy to do it and we can do it. But there's certain things that you just can't do in senior year, right? We can't establish new study habits. We can't make them get an essay done faster if they're not used to doing that. With a student that we've sort of shaped since ninth or 10th grade, by the time they're in senior year, they're probably still struggling with ADHD, but they figure out a number of coping mechanisms or ways around it. Second thing, find a passion. I mentioned this earlier about the student I had who've had great luck in the lab. I've had other students, I think I mentioned it before, a student who got really, really into theater and started directing his plays and, got kind of committed to musicals and things like that. That helped. I've had students get really involved with art, photography, or sculpture. So the key is find a passion. Maybe it's a subject that the student really likes. Maybe it's an art. Maybe it's a sport. But whatever it is, we want something that student can kind of take pride and ownership of. It helps them stay focused. And also from just sort of the more cynical point of view of getting them into college, one of the things we always stress in the college process is finding a passion project or like a signature achievement by senior year. Again, a student comes to me in August of their senior year, it's harder to come up with what that passion project can be. A student who found that passion in 10th grade, you've been working at it for 2 years. It's the thing that's kept them focused, but it also ends up being the thing that really makes them stand out on their application. Both that, starting early and finding a passion, kind of go into the next point I would make, which is we need to go slowly with that student. It has to be planning. It has to be methodical. We don't want to just throw things at that student because that's just going to make them feel overwhelmed. And if they feel overwhelmed, the ADHD gets triggered and it starts that kind of snowballing and cycling effect. And then the last two things I would just say, find an expert and develop an ally. So we want a counselor or somebody who can be kind of a support system for the family and for the child, the student, especially, parents and teenagers don't always see eye to eye. Maybe they never see eye to eye. So it's helpful just to have somebody in that middle ground who can kind of advocate for both sides. Most important question. So this is the one I get asked most frequently from any student I've ever had who has ADHD or dyslexia or dysgraphia or anything is, should I disclose this on my application? So I want to stress first off, a school cannot discriminate against you legally for having a diverse, educational need. That being said, the school, nothing's perfect, right? People get biased on things. So when we do this, it's the same thing, same advice I'd give about discussing like a mental health episode or other things like that. You can do it. You don't have to do it. To get the accommodations in college, you do not have to write on the application that you needed them. You have to go to the school office, in between that time that you accept the offer from the school and actually matriculate as a freshman. There can be a benefit of doing this. So there's a way to do it that I would recommend, and there's a way not to do it, but let's kind of go through the pros and cons. So the pro of saying on your application, I have ADHD or I've suffered from this from my last several years. The pro is that it can show that you are a student who has overcome something, especially in the last 2 years with the Supreme Court in the United States getting rid of affirmative action at schools. A lot of colleges, especially the ones we were talking about before, like your Vanderbilts and Michigans and Cornells, have added a new supplemental essay that asks you about showing resilience or overcoming an educational barrier or something in that same wheelhouse. So this is a thing that you could write down for that essay. I've overcome an educational barrier because I have suffered from ADHD, but I haven't let that distract me from getting good A's, or good grades, I should say. The other kind of pro I would say is if the student does not have the perfect profile. So a student comes in, they have a C in a couple of classes, maybe the SAT scores aren't very good. The ADHD diagnosis that you admit on the application can kind of explain away some of those problems. So almost like I've said, I usually use the term a mea culpa, which is a Latin phrase that basically just means, here's my excuse. But it does offer that. It says, okay, the student has an A in the thing that they love. They don't have an A in a class that they don't love, and here's why. And then, as I mentioned, it can be easier to access accommodations, especially if you have a severe case and want to go to a school that really specializes in that. The only con I would say is that potential bias or misunderstanding. People who read and make decisions at colleges, they're human. So even though they're not supposed to have bias, I think we all know people are biased. Best thing to do for it in any case is when you disclose or how to disclose it, you can do it in an essay, you can do it in your personal statement, or there's a line on the Common App that asks you for, as I mentioned, that like mea culpa, just extra information. You can also do it in interviews. So if you get an interview with an alum or a person at the school, that's a great place to admit it. The main thing, though, on any of this is if you are going to disclose it, you do not want to disclose it as a sob story or a, pity me or anything like that. You want to frame it as something positive that you overcame. So it's better to have to say, oh, I have had ADHD, and here are the ways that I figured out how to cope with it. Or in spite of my ADHD, I've done A, B, and C. That's the way to do it instead of letting it be an excuse for something. So that would be the best piece of advice I would give. So yeah, just in terms of planning for college stuff before we get to the application point, I've said it like 100 times to Annette already, but patience is the key. So it may take a student with ADHD longer to make a difficult decision, like what college should they want to go to. But the two things I would emphasize, try to research and visit schools when you can. Visiting schools is important if you're able to do so because it again helps that student connect with something and see an end goal. And one of the best success things or indicators of success, I should say, for a student with ADHD is to have an end goal, something that they can buy into. So something that they are working toward. And then in terms of the application season itself, I've hinted at this already, but it's very stressful for everybody. It's a lot of work. So just thousands and thousands of words of writing, tons and tons and tons of information gathering. So having a good time management strategy during that is crucial because it's not the personal statements and essays and interviews and the activities list and all the things that go into an application. They're not something that you can just do in the last second. And for a student with ADHD, they really need to make sure that they buy into doing a little bit each day. So yeah, expected outcomes. The final thing I'll sort of say here, I have had tons and tons and tons and tons of students who have ADHD and get into their dream school and continue to thrive as adults. I've been doing this a long time. I had actually a student I was working with just this summer who I'd worked with back in 2018, 19, so before COVID. And she graduated, went to Bowdoin, came out, was working in finance, wants to go to business school. She has had focus issues. She used to have accommodations. She's still getting the accommodations on the GMAT and for business school, but again, she's doing super well. Her goal is Harvard or Harvard or Kellogg, which is Northwestern. I've had tons of students like that over the years who do incredibly well after ADHD. The main thing, though, is just remember it may be a little bit slower and more difficult of a process for a student with ADHD than a student who does not have ADHD. So be patient and celebrate achievements no matter how small they are. So at this point, I will open the floor up to questions. Yeah, let me know if anyone has any questions.
Definitely, there's a lot. First of all, is wonderful information sharing, Marcus. A lot of expertise and a lot of experience and knowledge. And do you want me to maybe in the middle of it, because some of the parents are already listing their question at the chat box, and I can read them to you. And also, one for parents, you can also open up your mic because I know when you're writing the webinar chat box, it's a limited space. There's a lot of things that are in detail, and especially in this ADHD special need kids, a lot of information you might be want to sharing. You can open up your mic. Just raise your hand, and that way you can explain your situation a little bit better to Marcus directly. And instead of maybe writing it, sometimes it's difficult to write, too long and stuff. So, okay, so like I said, once I see you raise your hand, I would, unmute you, and then I will call names if you in the sequence. And, like I said, we'll welcome you to also make yourself available to have a live conversation. And now, let me, Allison, you sharing the PPT? Okay, if you're sharing, then I will not go into. I thought I just make explanation. Okay, I would go back quickly, reinforce some of the IvyCompass resource as well. But right now, Allison already put it on there. I wanted to indicating if you would like to have, oh, okay. All right, Allison, okay. You put on the page, you want me to share some information, then I go ahead. Okay, I wanted to kind of quickly, because in the beginning, I mentioned a little bit briefly, but Marcus, give me some little bit of time, wanted to reinforce IvyCompass, okay? IvyCompass is a company, we actually filter out all the wonderful coach like Marcus and some of other coach, which is you see on our platform. They are very, very experienced in the college application arena. They do a lot of coaching. They help the students throughout the high school year to make sure they're understanding what they're doing in school to get a academic excellency, but at the same time, coaching them what to spend the time, how to spend the time, where to focus on summertime, and also school clubs, school class selection sequence, research project, volunteerism, leadership cultivation, all those areas. The coach main goal is really be there for you to answer questions, for you to ask questions. As a team, we're working together to make sure that students throughout the high school years to become more mature. So when they out of your reign, out of your wing, out of your care, when they get into the college, they will be able to gather resource for them to continue grow, continue learning. Okay, so IvyCompass is that platform. The platform we providing coaching like that. We also providing AP tutoring. We're providing research resources. We're providing internship resources. We also have a, economic coaching. So Marcus, just, we have in-house economic coaching. If you have any student wanted to do research on economic, that Ray is very successful. He is coaching our student, accomplishing, a lot of things for the student. Everybody, the student loves him. He just have that charisma to get to know the student. And we have a similar, resource like that. So if you are running into that entire high school needed to come to IvyCompass, so we're providing all variety resource in the center of the college application goal in mind, okay? So you can see 2024, we have, Princeton, MIT, Stanford, UPenn, Columbia, all different kind of school, also have like Chicago University, Michigan, NYU, Rice, Emory, you name it. Okay, so we have representation. Okay, next page, Allison. And like I mentioned, we have, like Marcus, have 18 years of experience. So we have multiple coaches because every single kids are different. Every family have different needs. So we are able to hosting multiple coaches like Marcus. Some people like to select Marcus. Some people maybe like to select a woman. Maybe some kids like to be more aggressive coaching. Some kids might like more like a big sister hand-holding method. We are able to providing all different kind of style coach in order to meeting with different families' style and also student personality and style. But our 90% students are going to top 40 school. And like I mentioned, like Marcus today, one of the conversation he has, although, some parents asking, we don't have a translation, but unfortunately, in order to have that smooth information sharing, I don't want to stop his, realm of thought. So the information, if you think English is not something you're very familiar with, go to our website, stay in our WeChat. We will sharing recording. We will share recording, and then you can, listening multiple times or maybe have a translation app to better understanding, at Marcus's information. Okay, next page. So if you wanted to look our past video and also information, and some of the parents asking us for PPT, if you go into our website under the webinar, you can repeatedly watching those webinars. in order to have those PPT. Okay, PPT is Marcus's proprietary information, so we're not able to share with you. But by watching the recording, you'll be able to capture even more information one by one. To review even more deeper. Okay, next. Like I said, you can focus to maybe follow us to our website, 公众号. You can also stay our WeChat group so you can continue to see different kind of type of information, different kind of type of focus to share with you. So you're welcome to scan the barcode here. So somebody will be bringing you to our WeChat group. Okay, next. I think to the last page. Yes. Okay. Let me spend, one more time. If you would like to have a deeper conversation, like 30 minutes to 45 minutes of free consultation with Marcus, so you can have a one-on-one conversation to even more. Even, today, even you ask questions, you might not have a whole lot of time because I have to accommodating, all different kind of type of needs, whole different kind of type of question with different kind of family. So you might not able to really asking 2 or 3 or 4 questions, but by scheduling a private one-on-one, you'll be, barcode, just scan the barcode on the right-hand side. That way, me and Allison and IvyCompass team, we will be scheduling, have a conversation with you and scheduling that free 30 minutes consultation, for you in order for you to get to know Marcus better. And if you're not ready, you just wanted to stay put, continue watching IvyCompass information sharing, then you go into the left-hand side barcode, you scan that barcode, somebody will bring you to our IvyCompass college application WeChat group. That way you can continue following us, okay? So we will put this on so you can stay in that page. But in the meantime, let me go through some of the questions. Some of them are not questions, but a statement. So, but you can make a comments, Marcus. I'm just going to read it to you and you can make a comments. Amy are listing maybe his comments. I know a boy diagnosed with ADHD. He constantly missing deadline at school, resulting in a poor GPA below 3.0. For a college application for over 20 days, he only finished his activity list loosely. And it probably takes about 20 minutes to finish. I am wondering if there's typical for ADHD and if he is just lazy. He lies all the time with all kinds of excuses and does not appear that he has anything he's interested in, as you mentioned. So can you just make a comment? Is that normal behavior? So, the parents know how to support that.
Yeah, I would put it like this. There's kids who lie and are lazy with ADHD. There's kids who lie and are lazy without ADHD. I wouldn't say it's not normal or abnormal. It sounds like the child lacks motivation, which it can be a side effect of ADHD because it gets more challenging for them to stay motivated. But yeah, it's not really an ADHD thing that prevents him from completely not doing his work, let's say.
Okay. All right. So as parents, we just had to supporting them, finding out the resources, outside resource expertise, how to help the kids, right? He must be running into a challenging and difficult situation. That's why sometimes the lazy coming from, they don't know what to do it. They don't know how to process themselves. Right?
Yeah, and also with the college applications, this is common for students who don't have ADHD as well, but it's if they're not that enamored of or excited about the schools they're applying to, they don't really see a future, they tend to shut down at this time because it's a really stressful time in their lives, regardless of ADHD or not ADHD. So it definitely, it sounds like a student who just kind of needs some motivation, not a negative motivation, but a positive one, something that says like, this is the goal to look for and a goal we can work toward.
Yeah, there's a lot of work there to be done. So Amy, we're hoping to maybe have a conversation with you and see if our resource is able to help you or, you are a family, your kid. Okay, the next one from E9 is how about mental process slow problem? The mental process slowing problem for some of the smart kids. Any college would provide accommodation for that.
Yeah, that's another one. So there's different names for that. Sometimes that's called an executive functioning disorder, or there's also an executive processing issue, and there's another one that I'm blanking out on the name of. But that's one colleges will typically offer accommodations for, as long as you have the diagnosis and the proper paperwork from from a psychiatrist.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Marcus. Next from Marona. Hi, Marcus. Thank you very much for the informative sharing. Do you have any example of the student with autism admitted into college? What is the big picture of admission like for kids with autism?
So that's a good question. Like ADHD, there's such a wide range of children on the spectrum, or high school students, college students on the spectrum. So it's one of those things that really depends on the student and how what their symptoms are, how it manifests itself. I've worked with a lot of students over the years who are on the spectrum. Some of them are frankly like geniuses when it comes to whatever subject they're really into. Chemistry, I feel like it's always a STEM student. I've had STEM or music. I've had a lot of music and ASD kids. And typically the only spot that gets to be dangerous for them in the application is if the autism spectrum disorder is so strong that there's some grade issue or testing issue, something that has prevented them from success in school. That, or often they need a lot of help getting good recommendation letters from teachers, because teachers sometimes don't like them because they're not the most active students in class typically. And then some schools require an interview or suggest an interview, so common at the Ivy League. And I feel like those students need a lot of coaching on how to be interviewed. And that's the way it works. And then that kind of disclosure question I mentioned about ADHD, same kind of pro and con there. There's not a danger in saying that you're on the spectrum from getting in point of view. But you definitely want to frame it as I have overcome this, or this is a challenge in my everyday life, but I've gotten better with it. But yeah, that's again, kind of like ADHD, a thing that we're seeing more and more diagnoses of, because people are looking out for it. Doctors see it, parents see it, teachers see it more. So yeah.
Thank you. And so add on that, I have a very close friend. They have twins. The younger brother are more severe. The sister are a little bit better. So the sister actually in college now, the second year. She's functioning good. She's functioning fine. So it depends, right? Yeah. So, and they're autism totally, not just ADHD. But
right.
Like you said, it's different degrees of severity for them to functioning by themselves in the school. Right. Okay. The next question is asking from Esther. Will ADHD are more possible to be rejected? Hold on, keep it, Jenny. If they mentioning their ADHD in their application materials, would they be most likely rejected if they mentioning themselves as ADHD?
So I don't think so. It is a bit of a trade-off. So you do always run the risk of bias and things like that. I tend to think it's one of those things, it's an individual conversation to have with the student. If the student has had a very severe case, I will usually have them disclose it in that framing again of something positive, right? This is something I've overcome. This is something I work on. Frame it like that, and that usually helps. But I've had a lot of students who have ADHD and you just never mention it because it honestly doesn't seem to influence much in their lives other than the fact that they get extra time on tests and things like that.
Okay. It's like they still have to qualify, right? Qualify all the
Oh, yeah.
elements, like academic, yeah. Academic wise, they have to be in certain kind of type of category, and then leadership, volunteerism, research, or everything. Everything the college is evaluating those components the student need to have. Correct, right? Maybe
Yes,
this gives
yeah. That's a good clarification. I'm talking about two students that are the exact same student. One of them has ADHD and one of them doesn't. There's no difference there for college, but yeah, it's not like if you have ADHD, you get a free pass to Harvard or something. That doesn't work that way.
Right. But at the same time, they will not because you have ADHD only to reject it. they will not do that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, you still have to help the kids to be more competitive kind of thing in society as well as whole. Okay, next one coming from Holly. My child is a high functioning ASD, yet he excel academically and participate in school clubs, band, and sports. My question is, should we disclose their condition when applying colleges? If we do, could be affect their admission chances, especially we aim top 10 colleges. Repeating, parents asking this.
Yeah, that's a good question too. It sounds like, and honestly, it'd be one of those I'd want to talk to the child and get a better feel for them. The Usually with an ASD student, the stereotype or the kind of mark on them is that they're not actively involved in school life. So they're not involved in clubs, they're not involved in sports and things like that. It sounds like this child is involved, so that gets rid of some of those questions. I think just with the information you gave me, I probably wouldn't disclose. But again, I'd want to talk to the child and see how it manifests itself, and is it something that is worth disclosing?
Okay, if sounds like everything are kind of accomplished well, they involve things, they are active with things, may not necessarily need to be disclosed, right? That's case by case. Okay, so that's why I think, Holly, when you have a coach like Marcus, they have a lot of experience, they have a lot of cases in the past. When you have coach like that, at least you have somewhere to ask them questions, because based on the past experience and also cases and status, and they will be able to give you the most suitable direction and guidance, right? Kind of. Okay. Next question comes from Vivian. How about University of Maryland, College Park? Does it have good student support for the student like ASD?
So I don't know from personal experience. I don't think I've had students get into UMD. I don't know that I've actually had a student go to UMD. So UMD being Maryland. I know that they have an office for it. They're a state school. They're legally required to have it. So I wouldn't imagine that would be a problem. I don't know from my personal experience.
Okay. All right. Then we can talk about behind the 线下we can ask those kind of questions if you have anything. Okay, from Lee Pan, just want to make statement. I was diagnosed with ADHD and have successfully completed my degree requirements. The issue is you need to be okay with being absent from classes for a while. You can't tirelessly push yourself to maximize your time and efforts like there is no tomorrow. Your life depends on those grades. So statement can be successful. There's just like Marcus mentioned, there's a lot of people actually very successful complete their colleges on their lives, right? So.
Yeah, and actually, Lee, that's a good point. That's that kind of mental health note. I sort of brought up at the very tail end of the presentation, especially for a college student when they don't have that support system of mom and dad at home or someone taking care of them. It definitely is important to find something to do for your mental health, whether it be taking a time off every now and then, or I mentioned going on a long run or going to a movie, just things like that we all need, but especially a student with ADHD for sure, definitely needs. So that's good advice.
Excellent. Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Lee Pan. Next question is, can you share some of the name on time management and APP or planners? Maybe you can type on the chat box, Marcus.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Wanted to have time management, APP, or planners to help the parents are able to help their kids, supporting their kids better. 我们郑燕. I'm gonna asking Marcus to type into the chat box. Okay, so if you able to see the chat box, you'll be able to maybe copy down some of the tools and you can support your kids.
Yeah, I'll put them in the chat in a second here.
Okay, excellent.
So there's one. So I just put 5 in that I've had students use before. Todoist, Forest, ClickUp, Evernote, Google Classroom will often be set up for students. The other things you can use, so just the Google Calendar or iCal on your phone, you can link up. And then there's something called, I can't remember the name of it, but it's like Trays, I want to say, or Tray Up. It organizes your tasks for you so you can prioritize them. It's almost like I think they describe it as like an inbox outbox, like an old fashioned office would have. So like your, kind of 3 boxes of things like that. But yeah, they're all at the bottom. Oh, I sent it to host and panelists only. I'm sorry. I'll send them to everybody. That's on me.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I'm bad with technology apparently.
It's minor.
There we go.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I want to also mention, I know a partner, a company called Marigold. They are very good at the executive function. So if your kids needed that kind of support, you can add our WeChat and you can come down to ask me. I will make a connection to you for a company, help your kids do a executive function. They will help you managing the time management, stuff like that. What Marcus mentioned about executive function, okay? Like study habits, right? Study habits. There's one parent saying, what about my kids' only passion in playing video games?
So I've had a lot of students like that over the years. What I've got a couple interventions that I really like for that. My favorite one is to try to get them to take a class on game design. So if you go to a bunch of universities offer this online classes, but programs like Coursera are great for this. They teach coding and script writing, and they have a whole bunch of courses that are designed like coding for video game design or plot structure for video game design. And you can turn that video game passion into something productive and proactive. That's one I like. I've had other students do things with it too. They'll set up a charity component to a video game, which, as an example, I think I'm trying to remember what game it was. I'm bad with games. Roblox maybe. And they set up like an online tournament essentially, and whoever raised the most money, the money went to a local like dog shelter. So there's all kinds of things you can do with that. Again, the key is turning the thing that they're interested in into something that has impact on the world around them, something positive.
Mm-hmm. And video game is a huge industry. A lot of people in there make a lot of money. So your kids are, if they're truly good video games, maybe like you said, they can apply to that industry and still have a very fruitful future, right? Yeah. Okay. Can you also talk about a little bit from that from Li Pan? Can you also explain what it means to get accommodation for GMAT?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mentioned the GMAT at the end when I was talking about my student from Bowdoin. So the GMAT, it's not for college, it's for business school. So after college, if you want to go to business school, you take the GMAT or the GRE exams. And to get accommodations for the GMAT, it's the same as like the accommodations you get on the SAT or ACT or the APs. So it can be extra time. It can be extra time is the main one because the GMAT is online these days. But yeah, extra time, or you can have a reader, or you can have a private room, although that's standard on the GMAT anyway. So it's a very similar process as you would go through for the SAT or ACT. You just need to send some proof that this is an accommodation you normally get.
Right, right. Thank you, Marcus. I also heard there's a lot of students, the parents are getting ADHD diagnostic result so the kids can have extra time for SAT. So that's the same thing. So if your kids are getting extra time on SAT, then yes, the school will know, right? You will know automatically kind of thing. You getting a special accommodation for that special
Correct.
condition. Yeah, yeah. But Marcus just mentioned, depends, right? Sometimes pros and cons depends the application. If you release your have ADHD, sometimes okay, sometimes who knows, yeah? A lot of even regular application facing a lot of unforeseen situation. Depends on evaluator that day. Sometimes they're happy, that sometimes they're not. There's a lot of uncontrollable issue even for regular student too. Okay. From a Jean, if a student has a passion, how to balance that passion and the subject he or she doesn't like?
Ooh, that's a general question. So that this would be true of any student, not just students with ADHD or autism spectrum disorder, like we've been talking about. That's always tricky. So it's difficult to get any student to do, it's difficult to get any person to do anything they don't want to do, right? Yeah, usually there's different strategies. Some will do like a kind of an incentive structure or reward structure. So, I'll let you, I don't know, play violin if that's the passion project for an extra hour tonight if you finish your physics homework, that kind of thing. That works well with younger kids. High school kids are usually smart enough to see that that's not really a real punishment. So typically what you want to do, and this is, I think, the most important thing, I've mentioned this before as well, get the child, the student, however we want to consider them, to buy into some sort of long-term goal. So even with something like Sophia was mentioning, video game design, and that's super lucrative, and that can be a great passion project, but you can't get there if you don't also graduate high school, right? If you don't get, and you can't get into a good college if you don't have good grades in that. So it's a matter of kind of making sure that they have some end goal in mind, something that they understand that if I don't do this, this will make my life worse down the road. That's the way I would usually go about it. The other thing, though, because of the way you phrase the question, like balance the passion versus just a subject they don't like. With an ADHD student or a student with dyslexia or dysgraphia, it's always important to separate the issue. Is it that they don't like the subject, or is it that they truly don't understand it? Because if they're truly lost or don't understand it, the intervention is to get help. Get a tutor, have them take extra classes, watch YouTube videos, do whatever it happens to be, and that might make the student like the subject a little bit more. Or at least do better in it. If they, I'm never going to like physics for myself personally. I hated it in high school. Don't want to talk about it again. But I did it, and we all have to do it.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay. I think this kind of repeat, but I'm going to do that again because I think a lot of parents have that issue. Say, are the college acceptance rate criteria the same or a little lower for ADHD student? Or good strategy for student with high SAT but average 4 GPA? It's kind of repeat.
Yeah, it's worth saying again though. So just the there is no acceptance difference for ADHD and not. It's not a population of need. So it's not. So colleges will have sometimes change requirements for certain majors, for example. So I'll use like NYU is a great example of this. It's really hard to get into NYU if you're going to Stern for business school, grade-wise, academic. If you want to go to Tisch, which is the art school, the grades don't need to be that great. You have to be that great at whatever the art that you're doing, singing, theater, whatever. That's the thing. The lower the standards for an athlete, because an athlete brings in money to the university, that kind of thing. But ADHD students doesn't work that way. In terms of the strategy for high SAT and low GPA, that's a tricky one to sell because colleges tend to prioritize the GPA for the most part these days because the SATs kind of fallen out of favor at a lot of schools, even as they've gone back. Some schools are requiring it again, just this cycle. But generally, high SAT shows ability. Low GPA then suggests to them lack of effort. So we need to come up with a way of explaining that. I would usually use that extra line in the Common App on that additional information section to explain why the GPA is lower. It might be that school is too competitive. It might be that the semester that they took this one class, it was really challenging. Maybe this is still a common excuse that I'm seeing. There's a math grade that's low because the student lost a year of math during COVID lockdowns, or 2 years of math, and are just kind of struggling behind it. That's what we have to explain. So you just need to make it clear that it's not a lack of effort. It's something else that's causing it.
Right. Thank you very much. That's great information sharing. The next parents asking, can you help students from China? Yes, absolutely. Marcus have a lot of experience. Actually, a lot of students coming from China and also international school. And I'm in Beijing, matter of fact. I'm in Beijing right now. So if you're in China, you wanted to have opportunity to meet, I would like to have a conversation with you and connecting you with Marcus. Yes, definitely, we can help you, international school student. Okay. Yeah, there is a comment. You say there's no lazy people, just lack of motivation. I believe that. I agree with that as well. Okay, so let me see. Do you offer ADHD coaching? What that mean? I'm not too sure. Lin Chen. You don't, right? Marcus, you're
No.
yeah, he's helping for college application.
Yeah, I've done some tutoring work, but not these days. What you would want for that is an educational therapist, and that's usually what you would go for that. Or honestly, with ADHD, a lot of students benefit not even from an educational therapist, but from a normal therapist, like a mental health practitioner. That can be more helpful, but I don't do that personally now.
Yeah. Marcus is still focusing on how to coaching that student to become a better student overall for college application purpose. Based on the top university, their requirement, their liking, their criteria, Marcus' focus is coaching that student along the way in college 4 years to become a better student in that way. But if you have a special medical needs or psychological needs, you needed to find a specialty in those areas. Okay. So just want to make sure we're okay with that. JW is asking, my kid is a very high foundation of ASD and ADHD. If he try our school sports team, should we tell the coach why or why not?
I would, yeah. There's no danger or harm in that that I can think of. And this is true of a coach, a teacher, a therapist, any kind of person who works with your kids. The more information you bring to that person at the beginning, the easier it is for everybody. That way, there's no surprises. So, especially for ADHD and athletics, and autism as well. If a student gets frustrated and throws their bat or something because it's baseball, the coach might say might freak out at that kid correctly. If they know that this is the thing that can happen, they won't be surprised by it, and no adult working with a kid wants a surprise. We all plan for them, of course, because you have to. That's part of the job. But it's definitely better just to have a full disclosure right off the bat with that.
Great, excellent. I just wanted to take a moment mentioning, ask a question, 1 or 2 questions. If you have a more question, if you think Marcus is really, really experienced helping your kids overall performance in high school, have somebody accompany that child with understanding in terms on the road to the colleges you want to go to, you scan the barcode on the right-hand side. That way, me and Allison will follow up with you after this meeting, after this seminar. We will help you connecting. We will do our work to help you go through the process, connecting with Marcus. At least you have a free consultation for 30 minutes and 45 minutes, okay? That's Marcus is offering to us, kindly spend his time to offering to us. Then you can make a better judgment if Marcus is the right person your kids is working with. Matter of fact, right now, Marcus on our team is already coaching a couple students in ADHD. And also regular, okay? He's coaching both. Like, I want to emphasize, he's not just coaching ADHD kids only, but he already, like I said, have a lot of experience. Matter of fact, on our hand, he already doing that work. But at the same time, he's also coaching with a regular function student. So if you by the scan the barcode, fill the basic question, we'll be able to help you connecting with you and Marcus. Continue asking even more questions to have you, better to understanding if that resource is suitable for you. Okay. If you're not decided, then you can scan the barcode on the right-hand side. At least we have somebody bring you to our WeChat group. That way you can continue watching out to the future seminar information sharing scheduled. Okay. Here is a good question, I think. Let me see if you have information to share with people. Come from DJ. What can a high-functioning ASD student who has deficit in connecting with people, what is the best way for them to get the best recommendation possible? Because maybe they're not able to get in connection with the teachers, how to get a recommendation letter and stuff like that.
That's a good question. That's a tough one. So just so everybody kind of knows, the recommendation letter for the application should come from a person who knows the student well and can write about that student with kind of a good familiarity. You want personal anecdotes and that kind of thing. What I would usually recommend for a student, and again, I'll kind of assume that this is like a sophomore or a freshman in high school. So you kind of ask them to try as many different activities as they can get. So at the beginning, have them try mock trial, have them try musical theater, have them try robotics club, have them try whatever different clubs there are. See if one or two of them land. That person who's the adult supervisor for that, the coach or the supervisor, that's going to be the person to write a good recommendation because they know that student outside of class, even if that student's not necessarily the most outgoing person. The other one thing I would do is, if possible, try to get the student to take classes with some of the same teachers. So that teacher kind of has no choice but to get to know them. But generally speaking, you have to try to get the kid out of the comfort zone and have them go to the office hours and meet with their faculty one-on-one or participate in different clubs and events. But that's really the key, is to really try to foster those relationships. And the other one I'd mentioned, so most colleges require a counselor's recommendation. So that's a very easy conversation for a counselor and a student to have, because they have to talk. It's like required as part of the job. So if the counselor gets to know the student, the counselor can kind of help that student figure out teachers that are the best ones to ask for a recommendation letter from.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcus. Okay, next question thing I think is good, but there's one word I'm not familiar with, so I'm just going to try to pronounce. If I pronounce it wrong, Wendy, you can open up your mic and correct me, okay? Could you please give some suggestion for children with Asperger's syndrome? I don't know if I did it right. Applying for universities, and says how to appropriately disclose this in their PS, and whether university discriminating against international students from AS during admission. So 2 questions.
That's a good question too. I will admit, I haven't had any students who have manifested Asperger's syndrome, meaning like visible things. I've had students who have told me that they used to have it and they overcame the tics and so forth. It's a thing. It kind of like with the ADHD, like we were talking about earlier, it really depends on the specific situation. So if the student has, again, a kind of like what therapists will call disruptive Asperger, you probably do need to disclose that, because you need to go to a school that has a little bit more intensive of an accommodation for that. If a student has kind of mild Asperger's, you probably don't need to disclose that. In terms of the discrimination, colleges are not going to discriminate against a student with a disability. That's just not allowed legally. You'd have the same situation as an international student or as a domestic student. So really the only difficulty is being an international applicant, it does put you at a disadvantage from domestic applicants just because they have fewer spots available. But I wouldn't worry about the Asperger part of that, at least affecting them negatively.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcus. The next one coming from Lane. My son has good GPA when he was in public school. We transferred him into a private school for high school. his GPA dropped due to high academic rigors. What is your recommendation on the application?
That's one you want to spin that positively. So that's kind of a theme tonight. You can tell is anything that seems like a negative, as long as we sell it as a positive, you're good. So what I would do is in the additional information section of the common application, I would write a letter an essay rather that clarifies the reason that my grades are lower is because I was a student who was frankly bored and public school was too easy. And while I could have graduated from there with a 4.0, solid GPA, I chose to seek out more rigor and opportunities from this other high school. And that's how I would suggest doing it. And then and that should be fine. I mean, unless the grades are really terrible, like they're failing, but then that doesn't matter because they're not going to get into college if the grades are all Fs anyway. But yeah, that's the key is sell it as a positive. If I took on a new challenge and I don't regret it, even though it impacted me negatively in terms of my GPA.
Thank you. But I also want to mention, Marcus, if you don't mind, too, for the other angle of perspective is if you try to really struggling in one academic rigorous level school, maybe you need to considering to put him in suitable school because, a lot of Chinese family, they are so have the idea going to like put their kids into maybe more important, more academic rigorous school. They forgot some of the kids may not be suitable or may not be comfortable or happy in that school. If they're not doing well in that school, then it doesn't matter how much money you spend. The kids are not going to perform right. If they not perform right, the GPA is not good, then they're going to be affected when they're applying for colleges, right? Maybe put them in a more suitable school, let them succeed in that environment, in that school setting. You'll have a lot better chance to apply in better school. So the parents don't just so keen on this is great school, this is top school, this is really popular school, ranking really highly school, but don't forget if your kids are not able to cope right, become that somebody behind or damage their confidence, then I would recommend you not to put him in that situation. I'd rather be in the situation I am, the top one, than gaining more confidence, doing even better, than put somewhere he's always dragging it. And then it's very difficult for the child as well. Right? Marcus, you think?
I agree. Yeah, again, knowing the kind of limited information we have, it's hard to answer. But if, we could sit down and kind of talk about the direct path, the best path. Because one thing I've noticed too with certain parents is what's considered a bad GPA or a good GPA really varies. So I've had parents freak out and say, my son's only getting a 3.7 from a 3.8, and honestly, that's not going to be a huge difference. Versus, he was getting straight A's and now he's failing. That's what I would consider like a thing where we need to have a serious intervention.
That's true. That's true. Absolutely. Totally agree. Okay. The last question is what is the name for good ADHD support group or forms? Can you also put on chat box some of the ADHD?
Yeah. I have them all typed up. There's two just now the big ones that I know are CHAD and ADA, which are acronyms for something, and then there's a bunch of local ones. So I would just say check with the school or your church or temple or the local community center or on social media. So Reddit actually can have good advice. Facebook, Nextdoor, all of those again, just because they're user generated. Be cautious because we know how people can lie online and spread disinformation. But generally, those have been helpful for finding support groups.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Lynn made additional question, not additional question, additional comments saying their child, we just mentioned about dropping that GPA from a public school to private school is 3.95 dropped to 3.1. That's kind of a lot.
Yeah, that is kind of a lot. The other kind of gray area part of it, 3.1 in a much more rigorous curriculum and a weighted GPA may not factor much. Or I think the biggest thing is you want to look at what the other students at the new school's grades are. So when colleges look at applicants, the first group that they compare them to is the student's immediate student population. So the people who go to the exact same high school. So if everybody who's applying to Yale from this school has a 3.1 GPA, that then that's probably not a big deal. If everyone's applying with a 3.9 and he has a 3.1, then that's a big deal. And then that's where we want to talk about an intervention or switching schools or lowering the rigor of the classes, etc.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Marcus. Last question I can answer with you because that's our company strategy. Holly, you're asking if your English is not good enough, accommodating communication with Marcus. Is your child, is your son or daughter able to communicate with Marcus? That's important because Marcus is not coaching you. Marcus is coaching the student. So that's more important. And also by the company, we will support you. Maybe just pay a little bit more. We add another resource for you, like, account manager or account manager additional. Just by paying a little bit more, that account manager can do additional work to make sure you're understanding and also you're aware of exactly what Marcus is coaching your students. So no issue. We can totally, we even coaching students from China. Some of the parents don't speak English at all. We're still helping them. So just by adding a little bit more money because a little bit more work, and I can give you a account manager speak Chinese and English like me, somebody like me. Both language is very sufficient. That way we can keep you updated. We can, you can use some translation APP. We can also give you some update after the meeting to make sure you know exactly what Marcus is doing with your child, which I think it's not have an issue at all. Okay. So Holly, just fill the form on the right-hand side, what Allison is giving to you, and have a conversation with Marcus. Your English is great. I think your writing is great. Totally it works. Totally. We're supporting a lot of students from China, mainland China. Okay, so let me know what city you are in. I'm in Beijing right now for a business trip. So, we can have a conversation, okay? Last one, Lisa, is can you providing both recommendation letter in STEM, math, science, and technology such as a center? What that mean? And technology
so I think for the recommendation letters, I can write a recommendation letter, but you don't want it from me. You want it from a teacher at the school. So colleges, some colleges will only look at a recommendation letter if it comes from the teachers and staff at the school. Some colleges will take an extra letter from like a clergyman or a coach or a boss at an internship. But yeah, that's who you want them from, not from the college consultants.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. That's all the questions. This is a wonderful information. So maybe Marcus, just last as recap. Can you give us maybe some sentence, just recap today's information sharing, some of the key points, 1, 2, 3, you think is good?
Sure. Yeah. So big 3 things. 1, don't look at ADHD as a sentence on somebody's, future. ADHD can be, we can work with ADHD. The student can be as successful or as, unsuccessful as any other student, right? It's not a thing that dictates their future. 2, that being said, with a student with ADHD, patience is the key. So patience and kind of continuity, right? So having the same people work with them, having the slow down process, having the methods, those are the big things. And then the third thing I would just say, in terms of the college planning point of it, ADHD, dyslexia, ASD, any of these things probably just require a little bit of extra research to make sure that this school that we apply to is the right one for that student to get the needs that they have met. So yeah, basically 3 things. Nothing ADHD we can work around. Be patient, have a plan, and then just do some good research on what kinds of things your student needs for your son or daughter. I keep saying student for my term.
Right. Thank you very much. I think I just wanted to add on. I think Lisa just mentioned. I think her question is that okay? The recommendation letter coming from all STEM teacher.
Oh,
is that okay?
yeah, absolutely. It's For recommendation letters, it's the quality of the referral, not the quality of the referrer. By which I mean you just want a teacher who can write the best thing about the student. It doesn't matter if it's a social studies teacher and an English teacher, or if they're both chemistry teachers. It doesn't need to be a mix of things.
Excellent. Okay, wonderful. I think today, again, if you wish to have a conversation with Marcus, please scan the barcode on the right-hand side. And if you want to just stay with the IvyCompass WeChat group, scan the barcode on the left-hand side. And thank you very much, Marcus, for your wonderful information sharing. I learned a lot myself, and I'm sure all the participants learned a lot as well, and can tell you are very knowledgeable, very experienced, and so if someone have the fortunate to hire you as their coach, I am sure the student will benefiting a lot. So thank you again for your time to have a wonderful presentation tonight. And thank you, Allison, behind the scene for your technical support. And thank you for all the participants. Right now it's 11 o'clock. We still almost like 11 o'clock. We still have almost like 100 people online. So thank you for your support and also company.